Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Left Unread podcast. This, as always, is your host, Cam, joined also, as always, by my friend, Evan. Hello, Evan.
Hello, Cameron. That was one way to do the intro. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It is a great day here in sunny Rhode Island. As I'm back on my feet. That's right, folks. I am walking again after my brief broken footless Frank injury little journey there. So, yep, we're good. First thing I did when I got home today was finally fix my desk, which had broken during my injury. So I was able. It was literally the first thing I did. So now I'm good to go. I can write, I can record again with ease. Everything's good.
Fantastic.
My desk is not held together by packing tape anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Before this, Evan couldn't write with ease.
Yeah.
He could use every other vowel, but
Yeah. Wow, that was straight to jail for that one.
you get it? All right. So, yeah, I mean, I'm happy you're back on your feet.
Yeah. I celebrated with a Diet Dr. Pepper. That's right.
Nice, dude. It's just like regular
delicious.
Dr. Pepper without any of the calories.
Yep, that's right.
Or maybe what is it, like
and it's
5
better
calories?
than Dr. Pepper. It's better than Dr. Pepper Zero as well. Me personally, I am a Coca-Cola Zero guy. I like that over Diet Coke.
I like Diet Coke.
Yeah, I like Coke Zero.
You know what's a real good diet soda is a Diet Pepsi.
I don't think I really fucked on that. A&W Zero. I like a nice A&W Zero root beer. Although root beer I drink so rarely that's one that, like, if I do drink for it, or if I do drink it, I'll swing for it. I'm fine swinging for the full calories on that one. I drink root beer like 6 times a year.
I think 6 times a year for root beer is more than I drink any soda in a year. I just don't ever do it. Maybe I went to the movies recently. I saw the movie Sinners.
I want to see that, but unfortunately, I have just missed my window to see that in IMAX.
Really, already?
Yeah, and yeah, because fucking Thunderbolts is coming out, the
Interesting.
Marvel one. So Thunderbolts gets all the IMAX screens now.
That's so silly.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about Sinners is that it was really fun, kind of batshit, like, I don't know, spiritual successor to like From Dusk Till Dawn, but there's a lot of there's a lot of silly moments in it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think when a lot of the like release luster of it wears off, people will be a little more comfortable acknowledging that like some of the dialogue in that movie is like not just like silly, but like bad. You know what I mean? But you'll have to see it, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
we got a new David Cronenberg movie out, I think, this Friday.
yeah, that's what is
so-
it? It's the
Shrouds.
The Shrouds. I was gonna say the Veils.
So that I might celebrate my life back in the walking land by going see. I haven't been to the theater at all this year. It's rare for me. I go many times usually, but I haven't been to theaters yet this year. So that might be my return. Yes.
yeah, I'll have to check it out. I was never like a big Cronenberg guy, but
Perhaps my favorite director. Perhaps mine. Yeah. I love Cronenberg.
yeah,
Love him.
I know you do.
Yeah.
Body horror freaks me out. Like specifically body horror.
Yeah.
Body horror and like extreme gore.
Yeah.
But only realistic gore. Like I don't mind when it's like over the top cartoony.
Yeah.
But I don't like shit where it's like, hey, guess what a body really fucking looks like inside. I don't like that.
You should watch the movie The Brood, one of Cronenberg's early ones from the 70s.
Is it like all of the above?
No, it's super creepy. Like, it's like very like creepy, and obviously, like, I mean, Cronenberg is probably like the horniest director, or like certainly one of them. All of his movies are just like insane, like sexual tension. But this one, it's just like it's kind of like this like MK Ultra adjacent movie. He has many that are like that. Which involves some strange, kind of like spooky doctor who's like whisked this mother away. It's just, I don't really want to give it away, but it involves like mind control and like children and mother and her brood. It's like the ending is like one of the most psychotic things I've ever seen.
Is it like did you played Red Dead Redemption 2, right?
Yeah.
The Murphy brood?
I don't remember.
They had a mother. They were like weird mutant rednecks.
No,
Anyway.
it was no. If you're talking about like the X-Files episode,
Oh, well, that's similar too. Yeah.
no, it's not. It's not like incest like that. No.
What was that? That episode of the X-Files is fucking awesome.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
It's like that show had such wild extremes, and that
Yeah.
was way at the one of the high swings of the extremes. So good. What the fuck is that episode? Oh, Home. That episode's called Home.
something like
If you've never seen any episode of the X-Files, but have a basic understanding of like the Mulder-Scully dynamic, you're good. Go watch Home. It's a Monster of the Week episode, so it like doesn't matter about the backstory of the show. It's so good.
yeah.
So good. Anyway, let's get going because I have like 14 pages of notes, and it's not going to be like a long 14, but it's we gotta dive in because I told you guys I was writing an episode. I did. I finally just fucking went to the library and just wrote it there because my house is inhospitable. We're nearing the end of that period, but I'm also just beset on all sides by allergies and fucking all manners of the devil's work. So I don't know, but I've got some fucking shit, and we're gonna wrap up the Roanoke episode, and I want to let's just do it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Because we probably tricked everybody that we were just gonna do another shooting the shit episode, but we're not.
Yeah.
That's right. We still do work.
Yeah.
Evan's working on something. I wrote another one. So here we go. You guys ready? This is what you pay for on Patreon, by the way, which we'll tell you about at the end.
Yes.
Cool. So to start with, this episode is a sequel to episode 153. Can you believe we've done that many?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I guess it does sort of feel like that, doesn't it? You didn't have the benefit
it
of like
absolutely
not.
feels like we've done that many. Yeah.
You don't have the benefit of like not remembering the first 50. For me, it's like we're only at 103 episodes.
Yeah.
But anyway, it came out last month, Roanoke 1, and I'm going to assume that you've listened to that. I'm not going to be doing a huge recap here because there's a lot to cover, more than I realized when I started this, but I got it to 2 episodes. So I know sometimes when I say that, that's my sneaky way of saying, guess what, there's another one. No. We're getting it out of the way.
Yeah.
We're finishing it today. But there's more to this story than I ever realized, and it's a good one. Yeah. Both of these episodes will be posted in our Spotify playlist entitled LU Series, which coincidentally will also have all of our other series episodes in there. And they're kind of lumped together in sequence for ease of listening because, as I'm sure you've now noticed, we don't always record shit in order or in a timely fashion because we're working boys out here, part of the proletariat. And we just don't always have time, so that makes it a little easier if you're a Spotify listener. Also, LU Rippers is our playlist with all our music, which I always just like, whenever we mention one of the playlists, I like to mention the other, because, you know, whatever. It's just a little easy, free, effortless service we offer you all. So while that first episode dealt largely with the political, social, and religious underpinnings of the dawn of the European colonial era, this one is going to shift focus a little bit and deal more with the actual formation and brief existence of the Roanoke Colony itself, its mysterious disappearance, and then the kind of ending with a little footnote about the ongoing quest to discover the cause of that now infamous incident. Which is a little underwhelming because it truly is a mystery, but we'll get there.
Yep.
So
some of you may remember it from, I think, elementary school. Yeah, something like that.
And in grade school, it's kind of like a little footnote. We don't learn any of this preceding stuff, which to me is like why this is actually interesting. I had started reading this book, which is why I decided to do this episode, and I guess I should shout the book out here, called A Kingdom Strange, The Brief and Tragic History of the Lost Colony of Roanoke by a guy named James Horn, which is one of the most quoted sources, modern sources on it. And, he's got some little things that I find a little odd, but mostly like a pretty reliable narrative source. And I think even the Wikipedia article quotes it pretty heavily. So like today I went back and I was rereading my old notes, and like I sometimes, if I have series episodes, I'll go to the Wikipedia and like brush myself up on shit so that I'm like, ready. If it's been a couple weeks, I'm like ready to talk about what we did. And I was like, oh yeah, this is like pretty, I guess the narrative of this is kind of the narrative. So there we go.
Yeah, I know. I just remember as a kid, like, just always being like, who gives a shit? Kind of like, I was like,
I mean, sorry.
I'm not gonna spoil it, but it was just like, okay, so that happened, and then people found this, and then that's just kind of it.
So, full disclosure, what entices me about this is not that the colony disappears, because I've spoiled that 100 times throughout the recording of this. Like, we all know that at this point. If you grew up in the States, you know that the colony disappears. And that, in and of itself, because it's such a genuine mystery and, like, nobody ever figured it out, there's not a whole lot to report. Even with, like, modern science, spoiler alert, there's not much to say. But the story of it is awesome. And so that's really what hooked me in. The book's a fun read. I definitely recommend it. So, I just figured, it's kind of a cool way to tie in with our themes of, like, the evils of colonialism and, like, the weird, depraved, perverted mindset behind that as an enterprise as a whole. And in this one, we're going to get some real good, real quality, like, 16th century pervert mindset English behavior. So, buckle up. So it's 1585, and the expedition of Philip Amadas, or Amada, and Arthur Barlow, with which we ended last time, has returned to England to great acclaim. Queen Elizabeth, who had granted colonial rights in the Americas to Sir Walter Raleigh, the founder of the expedition, was so pleased with the reports brought back by Amada and Barlow that she immediately knighted Sir Walter Raleigh, earning him his Sir. So he's Sir Walter Raleigh. A lot of these people that we talk about, like him and Sir Francis Drake, I get kind of confused about when they were knighted in relation to the narrative, and a lot of modern sources posthumously always refer to them as Sir. So, I don't know. He wasn't a knight yet, but now he's Sir Walter Raleigh.
That's interesting. I never considered that. Is it like a...
Once you're a knight, you're always a knight, yeah.
Yeah, so if you refer to them when they're a child, that's still...
It's not like Octavian and Augustus.
That is the exact example I was thinking of.
I mean, you'll see, like, sometimes they'll say, like, but they'll say, like, the young Sir Walter. Like, that just seems to be the convention. So, once you've been named a knight, it applies to your entire life, and you are always Sir Walter Raleigh. Correct me in an email if I'm wrong, audience.
Yeah.
So, this is also when the vast territory that was claimed, as if they could do that. I mean, they can, but they can't, by the expedition was officially dubbed Virginia, after the perennially chaste Queen Elizabeth, who famously, totally, never had sex. Definitely not with Sir Walter Raleigh and Sir Francis Drake and, like, every hot guy on Earth at that point.
Yeah.
Did you end up looking up any pictures of Sir Walter Raleigh?
Who did I put on the cover of the last episode?
I think it was... No, you put the guy who led... I forget. His cousin. I already forget his name.
Yeah, a bunch of pictures of all of them were coming up when I was searching for them. So yeah.
Babes.
Yeah.
Cool-looking dudes. Sick beards, one earring, all with, like, wild hair. This was, like, a cool age of being an English guy. In the 1700s, when the wigs become a thing, it's, like, going to become a little tacky, like what we think of. But this was still when it was, like, these were cool guys we're talking about.
Yeah.
So Raleigh was proclaimed Lord Governor of Virginia and immediately set to work putting together a much larger expedition, comprised mainly, or exclusively, of military men, to return to Roanoke and establish a permanent colony there. As Raleigh was required to stay in England, because the Queen is infatuated with him, he named a man called Ralph Lane as governor of the colony in his stead, and put him at the head of the 600-man expedition. Amada would return as admiral of the fleet, and Simon Fernandes, our weird little Portuguese guy, was back as chief pilot. Sir Richard Grenville, a cousin of Sir Walter's, was placed in overall charge of the expedition, so the chain of command gets a little sticky, but basically, for all intents and purposes, Grenville is in charge of the whole thing. When they leave the colony, Ralph Lane is going to be left behind as governor. Walter Raleigh is the Lord Governor of the entire province of Virginia, which we established as basically the entire northeast of the United States. So, or East Coast, really, everything north of Florida. But so yeah, Richard Grenville's the big swinging dick for right now. The governors, two governors, a fleet admiral, whatever, all these things. I don't know if you remember last episode, but two local Socotan people, Monteo and Wanches, two Socotan men who had been brought to, quote, visit England. They may have been hostages. It's not really clear in the narrative. Yeah. But they hang around and they help these guys out a lot through this whole story. At least Monteo does. Yeah. So we like to think of it as a fun visit. Luckier than Pocahontas, who got brought there.
I can't even imagine what they must have thought about, like going to like England to like London in this period of time.
Oh, they must have hated it.
And they must just be like, thinking back to the paradise that they came from, they must have just be like, dude, yeah, we got to get these people out of there.
Well, obviously,
we got to show them a good time back in the New World.
Obviously, London was not so sick that they wanted to stay because they're like ready to go home. They're like on this trip. They're like, cool. Can you bring us back to like the lush, verdant paradise from whence we came? Like this smelly, nasty place where people like puke and shit in their room is like fine, but please bring us back to the verdant Chesapeake Bay. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know how many crabs we got there? This shit's fucking awesome.
Yeah, we don't got a chamber pot next to the bed.
Yeah, no need. You can just go anywhere, and it's clean.
Yeah, you don't have to shit right next to your bed.
Crystal clear waters and beautiful fresh fish and squash. You guys ever hear of squash? It rips. It's so good. So this expedition contained 7 ships, and it was well stocked, or so they thought, to meet whatever challenges came their way. Something we're going to learn throughout this story is this is early days of New World colonization. They don't really know what well stocking is yet, and that's going to prove to be a frequent issue during this episode.
It's a long journey. There's a lot of weather patterns.
It's a long journey,
in the North Atlantic,
and they also like really don't know what the fuck they're getting into in the Americas. So like. Yeah. You know, better to measure twice, cut once. These are big measure once guys.
Yeah.
They're all on that measure once mentality.
Yeah.
So I could spend another entire episode going into all the ups and downs and whatever, but I do want to keep this to 2 episodes. But I easily could have made 3 out of this. And eventually I want to get to the disappearing colony stuff today, so I will summarize as much as I can. So if I skip anything, just read the book. So about 10 days out from England, in late April of 1585... almost 440 years ago to the day at the time of recording.
Nice. Yeah.
A storm caused the ships to separate, and Sir Richard Granville's flagship, the Tiger, was separated from the rest of the voyage. Luckily, Fernandez had established a contingency for this this potentiality.
He's thinking, yeah.
Well, just wait, because he's... whatever, just wait. And the ships had a rendezvous point on the south coast of the island of Puerto Rico, so... they're learning. They're figuring out, hey, weather and stuff. We got to prepare for that. So sailing solo, the Tiger made great time to the Caribbean and had so much extra time there that Sir Richard decided to do some privateering while he had the opportunity. The English love being pirates, being legal pirates. They love it. He ended up setting up a base on the main island of Puerto Rico, and while initially negotiating for a resupply with the local Spanish authorities, he ended up bailing when it became clear, to him at least, he might have been paranoid, that the Spanish were actually going to try to attack him and put a stop to his whole expedition. So he instead, some of the ships that had gotten scattered by the storm had arrived. He got them all mobilized. He headed back out into the Caribbean, and he captured 2 Spanish galleons, and he added them to the fleet. And then finally in June... though they were still waiting on a couple of boats, he determined that it was time to head out. So they stopped off in Hispaniola, modern Haiti and the DR, and there was a settlement there called La Isabela, and they were willing to trade with him. So he got some more supplies, and they set off for Roanoke.
Simply awesome. She touched by me in painted on jeans, and all had turned walks in the room. And I get so excited just from her perfume. Electric eyes that you can't ignore. And passion burns you like never before. I was in search of a good time, just running my game, yeah. Love was the furthest from my mind, yeah. Caribbean queen, can't get her sharing the same dream. Don't want to stand our hearts, they're beating one. Ooh, no more love on the run. I love you, I need you. Caribbean queen, can't get her sharing the same dream. Don't want to stand our hearts, they're beating one. Ooh, yeah, no more love on the run.
Now, in late June of 1585, after reaching the Outer Banks, the Tiger ran aground on one of the many shallow, rocky sandbanks that formed the barrier islands. This destroyed the bulk of the supplies stored in the cargo hold, so all that privateering and resupplying was for nothing. Simon Fernandez, the rascal, was blamed for his utter lack of skill in navigating the islands. It became clear that the larger ships would have to remain outside the barrier, and so while the Tiger was beached for repairs and to salvage what could be saved of the food, Sir Grenville sent a group of men with Winchase to meet up with Wingina, chief of the Secotans. You guys remember Wingina? To alert the chief that they had returned, were planning to stay, and to ask if any of the ships separated by the storm, any other Englishmen had arrived elsewhere that they should know about. And Grenville was delighted to find that two of the ships, the Roebuck and the Dorothy, had indeed arrived in Virginia, and they were en route to rendezvous with him. So it's now time to choose a site for the settlement, which would have to be considerably smaller due to the lost supplies. An expedition, guided by Manteo, the other Secotan guide, who had been to England, set out to do just that. During their travels, they stopped at several indigenous settlements, and as part of their search for riches, they showed off some shiny items to the natives, asking, hey, where can I find more stuff like this?
Yeah.
This didn't really seem to register, because, spoiler again, there isn't a bunch of that stuff just floating around.
Yeah.
But at one point on the trip...
Yeah, no chalices just sitting in riverbanks.
No, they're waiting for, they're thinking of the Aztecs.
Yeah.
This is a different whole group of people up here.
Yeah.
This didn't really seem to register, as I said. But at one point, the natives obviously thought this stuff they were showing was cool and maybe mistook it as gifts or what. Who knows? A silver cup and a few other things wound up missing, presumed stolen. Now, remember this silver cup, because Grenville is definitely going to remember the silver cup. So the English leave. They don't make a scene. They eventually make their way to the main village of the Secotan tribe, where they are met by Wingina, who was the absolute picture of dignity and hospitality. There's a guy with them named John White, who's an artist. He's there to draw maps, but is also just a good artist in general. And there's a lot of pictures that he painted that survive to this day. They're available in the book, but you can also look them up. And he painted a picture of Wingina, and every native that he painted is just fit and tan and proud and handsome. And the English were, sick and fucking toothless and
rotting,
scurvy-ridden,
fucking,
and here are these beautiful,
greasy hair,
clean. Yeah. They smell nice. I mean, at least
weird skin stuff going on, lesions, fucking,
exactly.
Yeah. Probably smelled like fucking barn animals.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, nobody probably smelled good. Even the clean people probably smelled bad by today's standards.
Yeah.
But back then, there was a noticeable difference.
Yeah.
So So, he throws a feast for them. So after a bunch of feasting and dancing, and he has hot Indian ladies dancing for them. And there's paintings of all this stuff. John, in a very normal and chill way, with a belly full of local food, Grenville decides it's time to lay down the fucking law.
Yeah.
This is about to demonstrate some real English insanity. Shit's about to get really predictable and stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So after eating all this free food and accepting this hospitality, he sends Amada and a small contingent of men back to the village where the cup had been taken to retrieve the stolen property, because it mattered very much to him. Mm-hmm. The feasts and hospitality were great and all, but brave Englishmen couldn't just let these natives take a cup from them. They had to understand who the new bosses in town were. Evidently, the people of the village could sense trouble, because when they spotted the English returning, they cleared out. So Amada took this opportunity to fucking raze the entire village to the ground and destroyed all the crop fields in the surrounding area. And they never got the cup back, but at least they were able to destroy the livelihoods of an entire group of people.
And also, you know what I mean, like, those crops probably could have been good for these Englishmen that didn't really have a ton of supplies.
Yeah, this is an insane thing to do. This is a genuinely crazy thing to do, and it's the beginning of, it clues the natives, the Secotans, and all the other people in the area in that, like, okay, these people have some sort of like deep and incurable mental illness that is like endemic to their culture and cannot be cured except by the fucking blade. Like the only way to cure them will be to wipe them from the planet.
Yeah,
I digress. They just got given like a really sick party. And then, in repayment, they burned an entire village over a cup. Because they really like stuff, the English. Big on stuff.
They're materialists.
They're majorly materialists, but not in, like, the cool communist way.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
like,
They're like the 15th century style of materialists.
Right.
Yeah.
On that note, Grenville had noted that during this entire expedition, none of the locals seemed to have anything cool or good or valuable, like gold or silver or, like, fun cups or whatever. So in the absence of a more suitable spot inland, closer to treasure, he resigned himself to establishing a colony on Roanoke Island. And so he went to meet with Wingina's brother, who you might remember, Granjanimeo, who led the locals on the island. They agreed that there was plenty of room for everyone on Roanoke, and so the English got to work building a small settlement. Mm-hmm. First mistake, Granjanimeo. Due to lost supplies, the colony would be much smaller than originally planned. About 100 men would stay instead of the planned 300. Luckily, a second expedition, led by Bernard Drake, brother of Sir Francis, had planned to leave England that June, and so by now they were probably, hopefully, due to arrive any day. Grenville himself resolved to return to England and report on his success, leaving Governor Ralph Lane to do his thing in Virginia. What nobody realized is that after the departure of the first expedition, Bernard Drake's follow-up expedition had been diverted by Queen Elizabeth to Newfoundland to go fuck with the Spanish fishing fleets more up there, because that was really lucrative last episode. And so they were actually not even coming. Let alone being months away, they're just not coming. But either way, it's time to build. So there are no surviving descriptions of precisely how Ralph Lane decided to lay out the Roanoke settlement, though records of how he had established the earlier temporary forts during the fleet's stay in the Caribbean probably do lend some degree of insight into the process. It would have been a relatively lightly fortified encampment with palisades and then a series of like ditches and earthworks surrounding it. Nothing too serious because they all assumed the locals were passive and friendly, and that the Spanish were unlikely to launch like a full-scale assault this far north outside their territory. And that they also just assumed the Spanish had no idea that they were building here. There would have been a battery, a barracks, a chapel, some small houses for the officers, a forge, a stable. They had some little gun works set up in the event of like a siege from sea or from land, but honestly nothing major. So while all of this was under construction, parties were sent out to explore the surrounding area. Grenville would eventually leave in August, assuming that Bernard Drake would be arriving shortly behind him. On his return voyage, he captured an extremely valuable Spanish galleon. I think it was called the Santa Maria, but I forgot to write it down here. Filled with
Santa Maria.
Not the famous
There's
one.
always one.
Yeah, there's got to be
Santa Maria.
Oh, listen. They love the fucking Virgin Mary. They love her.
She let me tell you guys, She's quite big in Iberia.
Oh,
and
yeah.
really just in general, Southern Europe.
Any Catholic country,
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah.
So on his and as I said, he captured that super riches laden galleon, and that actually, when he got back, kind of eclipsed everything else he had done. Everybody was like, "Wow, so sick! Stick it to the Spaniards." Because remember, this whole thing is happening over the backdrop of building tensions between the Empire of Spain and the burgeoning Empire of England, or the soon-to-be United Kingdom. And Elizabeth is really up to the idea of challenging Spanish supremacy abroad. And so, all that stuff with the Spanish Armada and everything is going to kind of happen towards the tail end of this story. So tensions are brewing, and that's sort of the deal in Europe right now. Mm-hmm. So the book goes into great detail on all of that stuff, which is also partly why it's a great read. It provides a lot of really cool backstory and interpersonal connections, and really goes in depth into like where this story fits in with the story of greater Europe. So I do recommend it. Yeah. The settlers there at Roanoke, where I want to kind of hone in, became convinced that Drake was never coming. Meanwhile, Grenville's off in England celebrating his triumph or whatever. And they're just sitting there, like, twiddling their thumbs. Bored as hell. Restless. Mm-hmm. The resupply never came. They have food, but they're basically just being supplied by the Indians who are keeping them alive. And so they're like, all right, well, let's send out some search parties. Maybe we can find, like, a better spot or, like, find some more food or whatever. But they came to notice during this time that anytime they visited a village, very shortly afterwards, that village was like decimated by smallpox or some other nasty European disease, because these people lived with animals.
Filthy fucking
just dirty. Like literally, they would visit a town and then everyone would get sick and die. So this combined with several violent clashes with various indigenous groups, particularly at this point the Weapemioks, and the spreading tale of their earlier incident with the silver cup, starts to really rapidly deteriorate the relations with the indigenous people, who are very quickly coming to realize that these Englishmen are some sort of plague.
Yeah. And you know what? They're right.
They're not wrong. Like, it's bad. It's just bad.
Yeah.
And these are my ancestors. I can own it. But it was a bad thing if you were an indigenous American person when these folks arrived. It was bad.
Yeah.
So as neither the Europeans nor the natives had any real understanding of the transmission of disease and how that worked at this point, they're all pretty confounded by it. The English are kind of like, well, bad luck. That's whatever. It's weird how that keeps happening, but they don't matter. They're not Christians, so who cares? The natives, on the other hand, cared quite a bit and began to assume that it must be intentional in some way, or a curse, or both. Rumors began to spread that the English were like zombies. They were like these, because they were pale, they looked like corpses. And so they were all like dirty and smelly. So they actually thought that they were like Walking Dead. And that they would visit a settlement and then shoot invisible bullets of disease at them and cause everyone to die as some sort of divine punishment or punishment from hell. Which, I mean, think about it. If you've only ever seen, like, beautiful, healthy, tanned people with, like, a balanced diet, and all of a sudden a bunch of, like, freaks, like, riddled with smallpox and scurvy wander into town, you're like, okay, those are dead demon zombies.
Yeah.
They must be.
Those are not good people. Those are not good things.
They all smell like poop from a butt, and they're fucking disgusting.
Yeah, they have, like, those green stink lines coming out of their mouth.
They look like Pigpen from the Peanuts. Yeah, every single one of them.
Yeah.
So eventually Grangenameo, brother of Wingina, and another man called Ensenor, who was one of Wingina's chief advisors, they both were claimed by illness. And at this point, the leader of the Secotans, Wingina, realized that these English can't stay. Like, he actually reportedly did not believe the hype that it was intentional or that they were zombies, but
they were just unintentionally.
He's like, whatever it is, like this is enough stuff. They killed that. They burned that village. Yeah. They're obviously insane. All they care about is gold.
Intentionally demons. They're just accidentally.
And everywhere they go follows like a deadly pestilence.
Yeah.
We need to get rid of these guys. Plus, they're like they're eating all our food. They won't learn how to farm for themselves. They like think we're just here to feed them. Yeah. And so, I don't know. It's not very neighborly, so we got to do something about it. Mm-hmm. So at this point in the narrative, Wingina apparently undergoes a name change. He calls himself Pemisapan, or he who watches closely. This is a point in the book that seemed a little odd to me when I read it, and so like my first thought was like, oh, are we sure this is like he just changed his name to like something more relevant? Are we sure it's not like his son or something? But nobody really seems to dispute this. Like this is sort of the accepted narrative. So at least as far as we know, he changes his name to like reflect his new distrust of the English, and then basically begins plotting to wipe out the settlement before the disease of the English could spread further and get out of hand. So he starts talking to this chief, Manatanon of the Roanoke tribe, who were sort of a subordinate tribe to the north. And through a convoluted series of messages, which end up kind of backfiring, he attempts to send Governor Lane of the settlement and a large chunk of his men north into a trap, which he's trying to engineer where they'll be massacred by Manatanon and the Roanokes, leaving the remaining colonists vulnerable to be picked off or starved out without him having to waste any of his own warriors. So basically he told Manatanon that Lane was coming north to talk, but like be aware because these Englishmen are dangerous. And then he told Lane, hey, I know you're looking for a good place to settle. You should go north into Roanoke territory, but beware, they're really dangerous. Meanwhile, neither side is like really sure what's going on. So Roanoke did gather some allies, but Lane, being English, was like actually ready to fucking party, and he just showed up and like surprised them all and fucking massacred a bunch of them and took Manatanon prisoner. And basically Manatanon was like, what? Like, I don't know. He told me you guys were coming to kill us, and I was waiting to see what you did, and then you came and shot a bunch of us, and it was really all Wingina, or whatever he calls himself now, Pemisipan. I don't know. You should go back and tell him that, like, I don't want any part of this. This is too weird.
Yep.
And so he gives it all up, and Wingina, now called Pemisipan, assuming that the English that he sent away to the north had been, massacred at this point, was basically just preparing to send a detachment of his people to the island to kind of clear out the fucking village, or at most, like, abandon the island and just leave them there to starve, and then, like, go back later and pick through their stuff. When all of a sudden, Ralph Lane comes back. Not only that, but he's got Manatanon's son hostage, Skiko. And he's like, listen, Manatanon and Skiko here told me everything. Sounds like you're a little bit of a conspirator, and you were trying to get us all killed. And I brought Skiko here to make sure that nobody tried any funny business. But I'm going to send him home now. And but he'll corroborate the whole thing, that his father told us about your little plan. So this is going to devolve into open conflict. Pemisipan basically is like, all right, I got to just like assault the island and kill everybody. But Skiko and Manatanon, faithful to the alliance that they had forged with the English after their little mishap up north, warn the English that this is coming. And Lane actually lures Pemisipan into a trap. He's like, okay, I'm taking a bunch of my guys now, and we're going to go south. So the settlement will be really undefended if anybody wants to attack it. And Pemisipan's like, great, I will fall for that. And he goes to attack it. They get ambushed. They end up killing him. So that's the end of Wingina Pemisipan. They cut his head off and display it outside the settlement gates. And so at this point, everybody in the settlement was like, all right, well, shit's gotten real. Nobody's come to save us. We should assume, since we just killed their chief, that, like, the onslaught is coming. So they're, like, hunkering down. And keep in mind, these are all soldiers. These are all dudes who have, like, fighting experience. So they're just like, all right, we got to set ourselves up for a siege. So they're, like, preparing. They're all stressed out. They know that they're vastly outnumbered, even though they have guns. And while they're, like, just trying to figure out what their next move is, something totally unexpected happens. In May of 1586, an English fleet is spotted offshore, led by Drake. However, it's not Bernard Drake, who they expected. It's his brother, Sir Francis Drake, who they did not expect. So, as I'd mentioned, Elizabeth had diverted Bernard Drake's fleet north to Newfoundland. What she had instead decided was that Francis Drake, who would be spending autumn and winter of 1585 harassing the Spanish in the Caribbean, would then afterwards head to Roanoke in his brother's place and at least swing through and drop off some supplies and help reinforce the colony. However, when he arrived, he found a haggard, hungry, and beleaguered bunch who were no longer being supplied by the Indians and were running out of food very rapidly. Now, Sir Francis had planned to drop off slaves and supplies he had captured in the West Indies before heading back to England. But when he made his way ashore and learned of the situation, he and Lane began to think evacuation might be the best bet. What did you say?
I said these are just great people.
Yeah, they're awful. They're awful. Oh, check this out. They're just doing bad shit.
There is not like a single thing the English are involved in at this point that you could call good or honest.
It's dirty business, dude. It's dirty business.
Dirty business being an
This would
Englishman.
make a great HBO show, though. Like, it'd be like The Sopranos. Like, they're all just up to dirty business.
Yeah.
So this is compounded as they're deciding whether or not to evacuate. A hurricane, which they had never encountered before, slams into the Outer Banks and shatters whatever is left of the settlement's morale, along with much of the literal settlement, and it ruins a lot of their supplies. And like they're just like, "Fuck, dude, we got to get the fuck out of here!" Like this place is crazy.
Yeah, there was probably some people just nearby that maybe could have.
Yeah, warned them.
Warned them, gave them a little heads up about.
If they hadn't been total psychos, maybe they would have been.
Hey, sometimes you know how it's like a lot warmer here than it is up north for you. Yeah, we get some crazy weather.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. To make space for these newcomers, it is assumed that Drake simply abandoned the many slaves he had captured at the colony, along with like a few of the original settlers who agreed to stay behind and like kind of watch the place. None of them are ever heard from again. There's no record of the slaves. He took them in the Indies. They never made it back to England. So whatever he did with them, it wasn't chill. But they had to make space for all these new people. So yeah, they're not good people. This return voyage is importantly the first time that tobacco, corn, and potatoes are brought back to England. Obviously valued much higher than the lives of the slaves that were also part of the expedition.
I mean, it really is crazy to me how like ubiquitous within European cuisine potatoes are.
Yeah,
and, like this is their introduction.
Yeah, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers.
Peppers in Asia as well. Like, again, there was no peppers in Asia, like, before the founding of the New World. So, I mean, pepper's quite ubiquitous in basically all, like, Asian cuisine, like, South and, like,
African
Southeast
cuisine, Asian cuisine,
But then potatoes, it's like, dude, think about, like, a single dish from...
But also Asia and Africa, potatoes are ubiquitous everywhere because they're easy to grow and they're actually really nutritionally dense. Like, of the staple foods... assuming you're eating the skin of the staple foods, potatoes are way better for you than like rice or bread. Yeah, you know, they're still starchy carbs, but they have much more to them than a lot of the existing staple foods in the old world.
Yeah, it's just like think of a single dish from northern, central, or eastern Europe that does not involve potatoes.
Yeah, they're from Peru. What are you gonna do? You know. So they arrive in July of 1586. I keep wanting to say 1856, but if I do that, it's a mistake. This is the 1500s, folks. To much aplomb. Privately, however...
Stop licking my leg.
I'm sorry, brother. It's just I'm hungry, and they just, you know, now that the boot's off, they taste so good.
It's so sweaty and nice.
The salty goodness of a Portuguese in their knee. So, even though everybody's stoked that they're back and the public is, like, totally enamored of them, privately, everyone involved, including the Queen, is, like, a little disappointed. After selling off everything, it only amounted to about 67,000 pounds sterling, which was, you know, not nothing, but not what they thought it would be. And I think that's in modern terms, 67,000 pounds. That wasn't made explicitly clear, but I think 67,000 pounds in the 1500s would have been a fuck ton of money. So I can only assume that that's like a modern translation of how much it worked out to. Yeah. Tons of English had died across all the various expeditions of the previous year. Barely any money was made, and none of the military goals against Spain were accomplished beyond a few high-profile acts of piracy.
like what the fuck these morons think? They literally, like, they didn't go there. They didn't really do any trade or anything like that. They get there and they immediately just massacre everybody and then get themselves killed.
Yeah, they're psychos.
And then they go back to England and they're like, I guess we kind of forgot our prime directive over there. Like, we just got there and decided to kill everybody.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
We found a bunch of farmers. We killed all of the farmers. We didn't.
Well, they took a cut.
How to do? Yeah. We didn't learn how to do any of the farming, and we also burned all of the crops that they did have.
Their chief? So, oh no, we cut his head off. Yeah. Well, we found out that he was trying to get rid of us. Well, because of the burning and the disease and the...
Yeah.
which
Did we
unreasonable.
get
of him.
any? Yeah, did we get anything for this?
Yeah, £67,000 in $2025.
Yeah.
Or
There was a
2000,
lot
I
of
think
wind.
$2010 because of
Yeah.
the time this was written. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's insane.
Never had a doubt in the beginning, never a doubt. Trusted you true in the beginning, I loved you right through. Arm in arm, we laughed like kids at all the silly things we did. You made me promises, promises. Knowing I'd believe promises, promises. You knew you'd never keep. Second time around, I'm still believing the words that you said. You said you'd always be here. A love forever still repeats in my head. You can't finish what you start. This is love. It breaks my heart. You made me promises, promises. You knew you'd never keep. Promises, promises. Why do I believe? Arm in arm, we laughed like kids at all the silly things we did. You can't finish what you start. This is love. It breaks my heart. You made me promises, promises. You knew you'd never keep. Promises, promises. Why do I believe all of your promises? You knew you'd never keep. Promises, promises. Why do I believe?
So Walter Raleigh, for his part, is furious that the colony was abandoned because he had actually sent out another expedition to reinforce them, led again by Sir Granville, to reinforce Roanoke. And that expedition had arrived shortly after this one had evacuated. If only cell phones had been invented, you know?
Yeah.
So he got there, found it totally abandoned, and was like, well, we can't just leave this here. So he left 15 people behind with supplies for a year, and then himself returned to England to be like, I don't know, dude, they're all gone. And then he gets back, and here they are. They've come back to England with Sir Francis Drake. And so this is where the roots of the mystery start to finally take shape. So Lane explains to Raleigh that he had been forced to abandon his post. And yeah, that sucks. But turns out that Roanoke had not actually been the best location in the first place. He had learned from Skiko and Manteo and other natives a little bit more about the lay of the land, including the apparent presence of a fabled city called Chaunis located in the fabled Appalachian Mountains, filled with riches. Again, if anybody who lives in the States will know that this place did not exist. They had also learned of a beautiful, calm, easily accessible bay at the mouth of the Chesapeake River, Chesapeake Bay. That would be a prime spot to settle, way easier than the Outer Banks. And so they should just go there.
This place does exist. Did exist, yeah.
Chesapeake Bay does exist.
Yeah.
Good crabs there. The beautiful city of Baltimore.
Yes.
So Rowley ascertained that a new settlement should indeed be formed, but he was like, you know what, these military guys were actually not the right call. All they did was go there and fucking rile up the natives, and then they, like, of course they didn't care about staying there. They're just on, like, military pay, and there's no real incentive for them to want to stick it out. So he's like, you know what, I'm going to do a civilian colony, filled with people that actually want to live there and have, like, a vested interest in farming and establishing a life there, instead of people that are just, like, setting up a fort to, like, hang out and fight people. So this expedition needed a leader. So he looked at Ralph Lane and was like, yeah, thanks for the intel about Chesapeake, but you're also a bailer, so not you. And Grenville would have been the next logical choice, but he was already off doing more privateering for the Queen. He ended up settling on John White, who I did mention before was the artist and map maker who had been present on the previous expedition and had been conspicuously present for a lot of this stuff. Now, Horn, the author of this book that I'm using, mentions that White was there this whole time. Other sources are less positive that he was present for this first voyage, so this is up for debate. I'm going to just follow the book that I read, but that's worth being aware of.
Yeah.
So White puts together a group of relatively young, enterprising, middle-class Englishmen and women with a strong financial incentive to see the colony succeed. These are people who had a little money but were not part of the landed gentry, and who could gain that by making their fortune over in the New World. And so they had this sort of vested interest in seeing the colony prosper. Included in this were his own daughter, Eleanor, and her husband, Ananias Dare. Ananias Dare.
No matter how you pronounce it, that's pretty fucking
An
sick
anus. And my son, an anus. So Eleanor was pregnant with her first child with an anus, who would later be christened Virginia after this entire fun enterprise. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Many more of the settlers, who numbered somewhere north of 100 souls, the accounts kind of vary, somewhere between 110 and 130. Many of them were interrelated, as White reasoned that family bonds would be helpful in making a project like this successful, which is actually a smart thought, right? So in January of 1587, the expedition sets forth ostensibly for Chesapeake, fully loaded with women and children and supplies and animals, but this time basically no military men. Not a great idea. Should have had a few.
Yeah, at least
I mean, there were guys on the boat, but not anybody who planned to stay once they settled.
Yeah.
So they arrive in the Outer Banks in June of that year, and the plan was to swing through Roanoke, pick up the 15 men who had been left behind by Grenville last year. But when they came ashore, they found that the entire place had been dismantled, was uninhabited, and overrun by melon vines. Melons also from the New World, by the way. They found scattered human remains, who they assumed to have been the 15 men, killed by locals. That's what they assumed.
Yeah.
So eventually all the settlers come ashore, because they're kind of unsure of their next steps. And they decide to temporarily stay in Roanoke while they determine what to do, because they haven't quite figured out how to get to this Chesapeake Bay. So they want to talk to the natives and figure out what the next step is.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, while they're there, at least one of the people went missing while he was out trying to forage for food. And they later discovered that he had been killed by natives. Manteo, who had gone back to England again with them, and just came back again, goes out and talks to the local Croatoan tribe, who are probably a sub-tribe of one of the bigger groups here.
Yeah.
He discovers that Wanchese, who had been his sort of counterpart, the other guy who had gone back to England, Wanchese had obviously determined that these people were not worth saving, and as soon as he came back, he became a war chief in his own right and put together a coalition of people and came and fucking destroyed the settlement, because he was like, fuck that place, fuck those people, I've been to their fucking home, it's dirty, it's smelly, it sucks, I don't know what Manteo's thinking, kill them all.
Yeah.
So Manteo informs the settlers that the vibe has changed substantially since the last settlers were here. And basically every indigenous person in the area is now convinced that the English are evil and should not be allowed to stay. So he advised against heading north to Chesapeake, as the local Powhatan tribe were far more powerful than any group that the English had encountered yet, and would likely not take their presence lightly, especially without fighting men, which they did not bring with them. So John White, who's leading this expedition, apparently was beseeched by the settlers, who convinced him that he should return to England for aid and actually bring some fighting men and supplies. Again, a recurring theme. They're never bringing enough shit.
Yeah.
Which he agrees to do at the end of 1587.
Ooh,
I know, I told you. Promising to return ASAP. Now, the settlers, for their part, endeavored to survive the winter at Roanoke, and then hopefully by next year, they would have a much nicer place to stay.
The English are not learning a single lesson.
They're not
anytime
good.
They do anything here. They keep making the same mistakes.
Well, I mean, obviously they figured it out eventually, because
Yeah.
we're not speaking fucking Iroquoian.
Yeah. But it's surprising how many attempts it takes.
They had people to spare. That's really
Yeah.
what it comes down to. They had a willingness to succeed.
Yep.
So White had a difficult go of it. He did make his way back to England at the end of that year, and he did get permission to kind of piggyback onto another company of privateers led by Grenville on another privateering run in 1588, and they would swing him through Roanoke after doing their business in the Caribbean and drop him off with some supplies and some men. This run, however, went sour before even leaving the Old World. They were attacked by French pirates off the coast of Morocco before they pivoted out past the Azores, and all the supplies that were bound for Roanoke were looted. So back to England they went, tails tucked between their legs. And White was not able to get a fully funded expedition together again until 1590. So by now the colonists, including his daughter and his granddaughter and his son-in-law and Anus, had been left high and dry for over 2 years, which is not good. So finally he finds a spot on another privateering expedition led by John Watts, which agreed to divert to the Outer Banks to deliver aid, men, and White himself. Now, in August of 1590, the Watts expedition approached Roanoke Island, and it was nighttime, and they spotted a single fire, like an ominous little fire in the distance on the northern shore, and it freaked them out. So they were like, we're going to wait till sunrise, and then we're going to go and see what's going on, because one fire is not a good sign. There's supposed to be like 100 people there. So let's go see what's going on. So they get there, they row over in the morning, and the entire place is completely abandoned, like empty, like there's nothing, not even a chicken. Unlike before where they had discovered human remains, here there is genuinely no evidence to suggest that anyone lived there. There were very recent footprints in the sand on the beach surrounding, suggesting that people had been there as recently as the night before, which is eerie, but nobody there now.
Also, there was fire the night before,
Yeah,
so
right.
there's somebody there.
Somebody there. There's natives on the island.
Yeah.
They're obviously, out. They're aware of the English. The English are not aware of them. These are not smart people.
Well.
So they discovered the letters CRO, or crow, carved into a tree, and then later the word Croatoan carved into one of the palisades around the settlement. White assumed that this meant that the settlers had packed up and left for nearby Croatoan Island, or that they had been attacked by the Croatoan tribe, who were endemic to that island, and that had left them a clue as to their whereabouts. They had discussed this possibility before White left, that should they have the need to pick up and leave, or should they find a better place to stay, they would leave clues as to their whereabouts. However, some of the marks that they said they would leave, like I forget what it's called, but like the little, the Knights Hospitaller, that type of cross,
Yeah.
that was supposed to be carved somewhere. That's nowhere. So there's also no boats. There's stuff has been dug up that was stashed and hidden, which would suggest that there was a knowledge of where those things were hidden. So it's unsure whether they were looted or what. There's no bodies, so there was no massacre, at least here. So there's really no evidence to suggest that these people are there at all. So meanwhile, the people in the Watts expedition are like, all right, listen, we said that we would come here with you, but this isn't, like, we're here to do some robbing, so we got to go. Like, we got to go out to the Caribbean and fight the Spanish. You can come with us or you can stay, but, like, we're going.
Yep.
and he tried to bargain with them, but they ended up it didn't work out. So he's forced to return home. And he would maintain for the rest of his life that the colonists had probably survived and relocated, but this was never confirmed to be true. Sir Walter Raleigh, because he's a shithead, actually seemed to prefer them never being found due to like loopholes that were left intentionally vague in his charter to colonize. If the colonists died, then the colony was not considered successful, and he still had rights to colonize further in Virginia. If they had survived and moved elsewhere, it might void his contract, and therefore he would have lost everything. So he was like perfectly fine with them being presumed dead and never discovered.
Yep.
Several expeditions over the ensuing century, or 50, 70 years, were sent out to ascertain the location of the surviving colonists, but they were never successfully located. Raleigh himself would eventually fund and then personally lead an expedition to the New World, the first time he's ever actually done this himself, which he claimed at the time was ostensibly to bring home my lost colonists. But he would later admit that he'd actually just been looking for El Dorado, which, again, spoiler, does not exist. So the search essentially ended at the start of the 18th century because, whatever, it's just they're not finding anything. And they didn't really have the technology or the means to dig any deeper. Though interest would return again in the 19th century in the modern era. And since then, there have been various attempts to kind of figure out what happened to these people. But
So they were looking for them for over 100 years?
On and off. So anytime that there were future expeditions to that area, it was always like on the docket. So John Smith, famously, of Pocahontas fame, one of his stated missions in settling the Chesapeake, and he predominantly encountered the Powhatan tribe, and that turned into a whole other thing. And Disney made a very accurate film portrayal of it, so just watch that if you want to know the story. But so he... as a famous example, one of the things he said was like, and I hope to discover what happened to the Roanoke Colony and establish contact with them. But that never happened. That was, I think, in the 1640s. And the last stated group that like included that on the docket was, I think, 1701. They set out and said, we'd like to try to find them. After that, people just stopped pretending. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
In the modern era, I mean, everything from attempts to use genetic testing to ascertain whether descendants of those settlers are still around, because there are descendants of them in England. And so if we could compare their genome to people, in the States, maybe there's a connection there. Archaeological digs have never found any human remains, anything that can be analyzed. There's never been conclusive like climatological research that showed that they were like wiped out by some storm. So there's really never been like a conclusive answer to why they departed the island. The logical assumption, and what most people at this point comfortably can assume, because there were no bodies there, they were forced to flee for some reason, whether it was attack by the locals or inclement weather or starvation, and found themselves basically swallowed by the New World, whether that was killed by natives or subsumed and kind of absorbed into local tribes, or likely some combination of the two. However, the lack of tangible evidence for any of these outcomes has led to the Roanoke Colony becoming one of the most enduring mysteries of the colonial age. Now, this little footnote about it, that last 5 minutes of the show, is kind of most of what kids here learn. But behind the facade of that spooky story, I find the deeper examination of the European lust for conquest and the sort of dawn of that era, and their desire for material wealth, and the sort of immediate souring of relations between Europeans and the indigenous populations, and then the introduction of rampant disease into the Americas. Also, I mean, it is worth noting, like we talked about briefly, the exchange the other way. They gave us syphilis, which was nice. And also potatoes and corn and peppers and tobacco and all these awesome things, tomatoes, squash. That's all part of this, and it's all kind of intimately tied. And so this is sort of just, to me, like a really interesting landmark in that historical era that you can kind of look at and learn so much about like that period by diving into. Also, the fact that the whole thing sort of exists against this backdrop of, growing tensions between the Spanish and the English, which would come to explode in like a massive war, which like the English are going to surprise the world and fucking smoke the Spanish Armada, and it ushers in like a whole new era. And so this is sort of like an early defining moment in that. And so my final verdict on it, I think, is that while it's fun sometimes to speculate about like ghosts and haints and banshees and horrible massacres and stuff, the real value in this story is sort of as like a hinge point in examining the foundational mythology, but also like the real sort of tangible goals of colonizing the Americas. And this, for better and often worse, is our sort of legacy here. And so I just found it to be like a truly fascinating story. It's been fun. It kind of distracted me completely from barbarians, which there are some commonalities. These are the descendants of those barbarians doing barbaric things in the Americas. But
dirty people.
Exactly. So the source, again, as I used, was A Kingdom Strange, The Brief and Tragic History of the Lost Colony of Roanoke by James Horn, which was written in 2010. Also supplemented by, some online sources and like Britannica and shit like that, just for the basics. But I do recommend it. I thought that it was a very interesting read, and like I said, there's a lot to dive into about this time period that is worth, I think, if you are a person who has anti-colonial beliefs, I think it's worth exploring the foundations of that kind of sickness and where it comes from and why it was allowed to become so pervasive.
For sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's that.
Yep. All right. Well,
colony's gone and we don't know why.
Yeah. Well, friends, I hope you enjoyed that nice little foray into the early colonial days of the New World. If you have, well then, have I got news for you. If you have a little bit of extra money on the side, and you would like to support the podcast in some small way, you can go to www.patreon.com/leftunread. You can sign up there for a small monthly amount to help keep the podcast going. Now, if you are on an Apple product, hands off the Patreon app button. Do not touch
don't even
that.
think about it.
Open Safari on your little iPhone. Type in www.patreon.com/leftunread. If you sign up through an app on an Apple device, you'll be surcharged an extra 30% on top of whatever you donate to us. So that's 30% that doesn't go to us, doesn't even go to Patreon, who takes a small, it's like 4 or 5%. This is 30%, so don't do that. If you cannot support us on Patreon, you can help us out in other ways. You can rate and review us on your podcast app of choice, which helps us get boosted in the algorithm, helps us find new listeners. You can also help us spread word of mouth. You can tell your friends, you can tell your coworkers, your neighbors, you can tell your local colonists as you get carried away like a suckling pig on a spit, that whenever you get out of this little hairy situation, you can listen to the Left Unread podcast. And without further ado, little suckling pigs. Have a great week.
Yeah,
and, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, on another exciting edition of Left Unread.
That's me eating our suckling pigs.